It is my great honor to introduce to you the president of ITC. He will have the honor to officially open this gathering here in Naarden. Garrett Riegg is a devoted Theosophist. He grew up in the United Lodge of Theosophists. His parents were Theosophists, but he's also connected with the Tsong. He's an attorney, and he lives in Oakland, and he will open up this gathering officially. Garrett Riegg.
Thank you, man. It's such a joy for me to open this conference officially for the International Theosophy Conferences, Inc. We've actually been a corporation for only about 6 years, and we've been a tradition for even longer than 16 years, which was mentioned. I've been coming 16 years, but actually the process started closer to 20 years ago. I'm hoping you can all hear me back there. Okay, good. So brothers and sisters, students of Theosophy, we welcome you on behalf of the board of directors. We welcome you and thank you for coming. The good news is that we've had so many beautiful expressions of our unity and our intentions already that I can eliminate several pages of my talk. So, yeah, and it won't be 25 minutes. We'll try to make it shorter. Because as always, I'm always surprised and delighted at how beautifully things come together for our conferences. Every conference has a great deal of suspense. We don't always know what each of the parts are going to do, each of the contributions, each of the speakers. And when we see them mesh beautifully, we know that there's synchronicity. We know there's a very good spirit in the air. So I am especially impressed this time that we've come the second time to Europe, and we have attracted a much different, more serious crowd because our subject and our conference itself is quite different and unique. Normally, those who are new to this should know that we usually have numerous speakers, sometimes on a whole variety of subjects. And we compress our business and our organizational thinking into a 1-hour meeting typically. This time, though, we're thinking not just for ITC, but for the entire theosophical movement. We're not thinking just for the next year or two, but in a sense, for the next century. So this is a very momentous day, and we are not here simply as ITC because, frankly, about half of you may have never been to an ITC meeting before. You don't have to be. ITC is very simple. We have a very short focus. We want to share theosophy among us. We want to share it between the different organizations. We want to be welcoming to all people who've studied theosophy almost in any way. Our only requirement is that if we have differences, our one standard, our one unifying principle is that we turn to the teachings of Madame Blavatsky and her masters. Pretty simple. We have no dues. We have a very simple membership. If you come to 2 conferences, you're a member. So far, that's worked. As we grow, it may change. We've really changed every 3 or 4 years in different ways. ITC, as I say, started back in 1996, really, and even before that was smaller meetings that grew and grew until in that year we had about 50 people and several from Europe. And I didn't actually come to it until 1998. And I was very impressed that we had people from Belgium and Sweden and England. And at the time, it was mostly ULT, but we were quite open to other people, and we were also quite open to the general public. It's evolved a little away from that. Now, especially this conference, the ULT is a fairly small group, partly because of the distance. And And we are really welcoming, especially the Adyar Theosophists, who are becoming in greater and greater numbers the last 3 or 4 years. And of course, we've always been well-sustained since 2008, really, by a solid presence from the Point Loma Theosophists. And over the years, we've had other theosophical groups come and go. We often have people, a central group, that come for years and years and years, maybe most of the last 15 or 20 years. We also have people who come once and get a great deal out of it and understand and learn about Theosophy and other organizations. And they may not come back for some years. So we are not here to, in any way, set up a new formal organization that mimics or copies or competes with any other organization. We're really here trying to simply share and help with the communication and the spiritual harmony between all Theosophists. And you're hearing about that, and you'll hear more about it. So what's special here is that we have much less of the head learning, which is important. Getting the principles right, learning about the nature of the universe in our own inner hearts and minds. But now we're going to be doing the practical side. And as Jan mentioned, instead of having 10 speakers that are named, we really have 146 or 150 of you, because we really do want and desire that each person is active and is able to express and exchange in small groups and larger groups. And we're working towards a Naarden declaration. We've given it different titles, but that's the short title. And we're not trying to determine exactly what comes out of it. We all have our own ideas. We obviously have a great deal of momentum in certain directions. And we have facilitators who will guide us to develop something, but we're looking to see what do those people who have been so active in the movement, as you all have, what do you think and what together can we come up with in terms of a blueprint or an inspiration for times to come? And it may or may not even be an official expression of ITC. It'll be expression of all of us here. And kind of like reminds me of the declaration that in my country, the United States, we hold very dear, which is our Declaration of Independence. And that declaration had some marvelous words, some good logic, some good politics, and we do think it was inspired greatly by the Theosophical masters. But what made it significant was not the paper or the words. It was the work that went into it, really for years and generations before. It was the education. It was the thought processes, and it was the devotion of the people that signed it. They took a lot of time to come up with that declaration. At the end of it, they pledged their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor. And about a third of them lost either their lives, their fortunes, or their honor. All of them suffered greatly. But it was a great expression of a new age. He was a great part of the Theosophical movement. And 100 years later, Madame Blavatsky came on the scene to be open about the Theosophical ideals and the need for a higher moral and ethics based on a more comprehensive understanding of metaphysics across all religions and all spiritual paths. So when we're talking about our theme today, or this conference, we have the important phrases: Theosophy, unity, and helping the world. Where do we go from here? Well, you're going to be doing that process of where do we go from here. But I should say a couple more words about where we are right here. So I gave you a little background on ITC. A lot of us have studied the history of the Theosophical movement in the Western world. And that's where Madame Blavatsky and the masters came to. That's where the need was. And most of us are from the West, a few of us from Asia. In the West, as you may remember, the instigation or the inspiration for these impulses, especially in the last quarter of most centuries, began with Tsong Khapa, the great Tibetan Buddhist reformer. And they went through great theosophists, some of whom succeeded in their lives, some of whom suffered greatly, some of whom were put to death. We can think of course, Jakob Böhme. We can think of Giordano Bruno, one who was burned at the stake. Paracelsus, the great father of medicine. These were considered great theosophists. Saint Germain, who tried to avoid the terrors of the French Revolution, and who inspired and supported the newly public, semi-public, but secret rituals of theosophy of its time, Freemasonry. So we're coming as a continuation of this cycle. And in my own theosophical background, in my lodges, there was a great expectation that 1975 we would see a messenger coming right to our lodges, right to the theosophical societies. And for most of us, it didn't seem to happen. There are different interpretations. So we have a big question mark, and we have different points of view on what was the message or the messengers of the recent last century, and what's our role now. And we don't need to get into the details of that, but I think it's good for all of us to think about, what is the direction of this culture? What would the Mahatmas be thinking and doing? If Madame Blavatsky came back, what would be her impulse? And it's not necessarily automatically that it would simply be in one or more of our theosophical organizations. And especially being divided the way we were, it might have been a reason why it didn't become obvious where the impulse was. And again, I don't think it matters. We each do our best. We each try to see our Dharma, understand the Dharma of the movement. So we've had some wonderful exchanges, and we've seen just from the ideas that ITC and the modern culture have been promulgating, especially with our new global society and the internet and instant communication across continents, that there's a new spirit in the world. And in spite of the tragedies, the terrors, the threats to civilization that we see by small wars and by ideologies, I believe Theosophy as a movement is on an upward arc, and that your presence here is evidence of that. There was, I think, in Theosophy as I grew up, what you could call a paper curtain between the different societies, the different theosophical organizations. I think that curtain is dissolving very quickly. We see people going across different societies to go to schools like Crotona or the European School of Theosophy. At the recent European Federation Congress, there were many representatives from the United Lodge of Theosophy, from the Point Loma group, and some of the people attending there went to local lodges in Paris to kind of see what goes on in these other organizations. And suddenly people are very comfortable with this. And for me, that's a new day. It's something we can be very open about, because there is this experience that we've had for, any way you want to count it, 6 to 20 years of people working together this way. So as Emerson said, there's nothing stronger than an idea whose time has come. And I do believe it's time for Theosophy's ideas to be in the world. And we who are organized in so many different ways can give so many wonderful impulses to those ideas. And whether they bear fruit directly in our organization or through many other ones that we are allied to is something we'll wait to see. I do also want to dedicate this conference to some extent, at least this moment, to think about the goals of the Mahatmas, of the Bodhisattvas, to relieve suffering in the world. And I know many people have expressed their desires, even in the facilitator meeting, to do something to help the world and to help those we see suffering around us. And it's not so much the material suffering, because we know in Theosophy that thoughts are real and our actions predict karmically what's going to happen. And the gift of Theosophy is to try to uplift and give guidance to everyone so we can have happier, more harmonious and loving lives. But I'm thinking especially in the last few months of the many civilians who have suffered in small wars, in airplane incidents or accidents. And I know that this little town of Naarden itself was very much affected by the tragic downing of the airplane over Ukraine. And of course, the Netherlands had many, many people on their airplane, and there's so many people who are gone from us, and many loved ones who are suffering. And I think that we all want to see more peace in the world and more harmony. And the power of thought and the power of a group like this is really tremendous. We know it even scientifically as well as theosophically. So I'd like to ask us to think about those who are suffering, especially in these very dangerous times, and those who want to avoid more bloodshed, discord, violence, and perhaps join with me in a few minutes of silent meditation for that. And I would like to open that meditation. I don't have a gong or a bell, but I'd like to just repeat an affirmation for you a few times, which many of you might know. It's a simple affirmation from the Buddhist tradition. And it's really just kind of a blessing or a prayer. So you might take a moment, take a deep breath or two, and settle yourself in your seat so we can, instead of having a musical interlude, which was beautiful, now have a moment of inner silence where our own thoughts and our own blessings and prayers for the world can sound in our own way, each in our own way, through our own traditions. But this Buddhist mantra is an expanding one that starts with where we are here and expands to the world. Very simply, may all beings in this room be well, happy, and at peace. We hold that thought, and then we say again, may all beings in this room and in this country be well, happy, and at peace. And finally we say, may all beings, may all sentient beings in the world and in this universe be well, happy, and at peace. Thank you. I know that Jan has thanked many people. Gratitude is really a wonderful gift for both the giver and the receiver. It puts us in our hearts. And in Theosophy, we often have this ideal of impersonality. And we know that our work is not for any reward, it's for the joy of serving and being part of this wonderful cause and this movement. But I would like to, without naming names, going into details, just want to share with you that there are scores of people, probably 60 or 70, who have so worked hard for this conference in so many small and large ways. So we're obviously grateful to the speakers, to the facilitators, to those who made all the arrangements for our physical comfort, for our food, for our wonderful technology, cameras, internet connections. It's an amazing collection. We have books outside. We have all things that can make a conference very interesting and exciting and rewarding. So I just want to thank all those who've been working in that direction. And even if we only see you now and then, I'm sure everyone shares my appreciation for all that's been done and that will be done in the next few days. And maybe I'll close with a little story. Happened last night. Herman was kind enough to drive several of us back here to the center. And it was a very dark night, later than we expected, coming out of our board meeting Songham. And we all tried to guess the right pathway. And we couldn't see signs, and it was dark. Suddenly we ended up deciding that this road was no longer a road, it was really just a walking path, and we couldn't go further. So we backed up, we tried to turn around, and we got stuck. And this is like 10 o'clock at night. And there was no way to get the little car out. You know, it was deep mud. So Herman made a call. And the auspice comes so quickly, the compassionate people. And they brought, the most important thing was the shovel, and the tracks, and the lights, and manpower. 4 or 5 men pushing in that car with all the different things we could do, finally got it free. But it was kind of, to me, symbolic of how we're in Kali Yuga, and we're bound to take some wrong turns. You know, we all make mistakes. And especially our board sometimes has disagreements, and we may make mistakes. And yet the final result is a happy one, especially when people chip in, just out of compassion, just a willingness to help, and it was fun. It was kind of an adventure. and the blessing was that about 10 minutes after we got free and got back to our cabins, huge rain. And we were it was so easy for us without the rain, if you can imagine. We might have never gotten out. So anyway, I felt that was something that was worth sharing because it was, for me, a very good omen for the conference and the future. We've had some challenging times, and now we're ready for the sunshine. Thank you very much.